Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the e-discovery channel. The special I'm still trying to decompress from Ilticon. Uh, um, Literally the day we're recording this on Friday, the day after I returned home. Doug, I'm not sure when did you come back yesterday as well?
No, I came back. I came back Wednesday. Had a
Wednesday.
little,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, had a little wedding anniversary thing. So you kind
Oh,
of want
yeah.
you want to make those. So
Well, happy anniversary. I didn't
thank
realize
you,
it. Yeah,
thank you.
great. Congratulations. How
Okay.
many years?
10.
10. Good for you. That's great. So we're chock full of our brains are spinning with technology information here, or misinformation, as the case may be. But we're really happy to have with us Ben Schorr. Ben, I love it on your LinkedIn page, Ben. Your title is Senior Content Program Manager, but under
Mhm.
that it says, "I help people be successful with Microsoft 365 and Copilot." And I thought that is the best succinct statement of what somebody does and what people are looking for that I've seen in a job title. Ben and I know each other, have known each other for years in the ABA Tech Show circles. We go back longer than I will talk about. There was a column this morning by Bob Ambrosi about this was the buzz at this show was the biggest it's ever been at Ilticon, and I thought, yeah, Bob didn't go to VSlug. He doesn't go. He isn't old enough to have gone back far enough for some of us old timers. Um, so, but Ben and I go way back in the ABA Tech Show days, and continuing the Ilticon tradition of let's hold it in a giant stadium. I understand the Tech Show this year is going to be at the McCormick Center.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
Oh my God! I mean, I'm sure they'll have a small space that they blocked off for that, but it's like, well, is there a bigger building in the state of Illinois? I don't think so, unless they put us in the football stadium. Holy cow.
I am
I
very
think back
curious
about
to
the
see
old
how this
days of,
works.
yeah, right, right.
Hmm.
I think of back of the original days of that thing where it used to float from city to city. They had a two or three back when Jeff Oresti was involved, and it was a small show. Of course, all technology was that way. So, anyways, Ben, we are here to ask you about how the heck do we be successful with Copilot. Um, I attended maybe 5 sessions at Ilticon on various Microsoft tools and products, but inevitably in every one, um, when Copilot came up, people were um, confused. You said just before we started, stuff gets changed all the time in the Microsoft environment. People felt that they didn't have a handle on what it could do and how it could help them. So, what do you think? What sort of tips can you give us? What do you like about Copilot?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really important with Copilot and probably just about any AI these days is discard the hype, right? I mean, I talk to a lot of customers and some of them are a little disillusioned right now. And the reason they're disillusioned is because they were expecting flying cars, right? They thought they were getting, and all it is a new Ford Explorer, right? I mean, it's a very nice vehicle. It's very useful. It does a lot of good things, but it's not a flying car. Okay. It's
That's a
a
good
it's
that you're absolutely right. That
yeah,
is absolutely people are thinking it's Buck Rogers in the 21st century.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's really not. It's Buck Rogers in the 20th century. It's it's it does a lot of great things, but it's not a big red easy button that just does your job for you. Oh no, it only saves me an hour a day. Like, oh, is that all? Wow, okay. So first of all, let's discard the hype and try to get the expectations right. It's a tool, like a lot of tools. It does some things really well. It doesn't other things it doesn't do very well. And so you got to use it for the right things. Understand what you're hoping to get out of it, and go from there. I would say from a tip standpoint, I'd say the first tip, and this will be near and dear to your hearts, I think, is before you roll out Copilot in your organization, in your firm, make sure your data house is in order. I saw all these talks people were giving, or I don't know people, but I heard people talking about, oh, Copilot, opens all these security problems in your firm because it exposes all this sensitive data to your users. Okay, now Copilot, it respects your M365 permissions. So I've sometimes said Copilot isn't a key, it's a light switch, right? It's not unlocking anything they didn't have before. It's just letting them find out that they always had that data. And so,
Nice.
I've used the example before that, years ago when I was a consultant, I went into a firm to do an audit for them, a security audit. And I found out that they had at one point in the past given their receptionist permissions to the HR system so that she could do data entry and enter people's birthdays for, they were going to do birthday parties for people. So they let the receptionist data enter people's birthdays into the HR system, but they gave her global admin permissions and they never took them back.
Yeah.
So this receptionist was still a global admin in their HR system. So she could see compensation, she could see disciplinary notes. I mean, she could see everything. I don't know that she knew she could see all of that, but she could. Copilot's it's a little bit the same way, right? If you have not done a very good job of setting the permissions on your files in your system, when you roll out Copilot, it's not unlocking anything, but it may make it easier for people to discover that they've always had permission to really sensitive files. Okay. So that's my first tip is before you roll it out, it's a good idea to check, make sure all the sensitive files are only visible to the people who are supposed to be able to see them and not to the people who aren't, and go from there. So that's the first thing I would say is make sure you get your data house in order. The other part I would do with that would be anything that you want Copilot to see, you need to bring into Microsoft 365. If it's on your local C drive, Copilot can't see it, right? If it's on a third-party storage device, if it's on a third-party cloud storage, Copilot can't see it unless you have a plugin or a connector for it. So I understand some of the vendors like NetDocuments, I believe, is doing a connector.
Right.
A couple of the other vendors, I'm not sure what the status of those are. They may have already rolled them out. Law Toolbox, of course, has a plugin.
NetDocs has, I believe, a couple other people were working on it. I believe.
At Tech Show, one of their reps told me they were working on it, so they may have already finished it. So if they've got a connector, then yes, you can install the connector and then Copilot can see that stuff. But if you don't have the connector, then things that you're storing in third-party locations or outside of Microsoft 365, Copilot's not going to see that. So if you want Copilot to see it, make sure you can get that connector and set that up. And then, of course, the other thing is true, which is make sure your document retention policies are correct and enforced. Because just like anything, if you brought a new intern in and you said, hey, I want you to draft a will, and here's our body of work that we've done in the past, right? And they're looking at wills you did 25 years ago. That may not be the best. Those might not be the best basis documents, right? So for Copilot, it's probably a good idea to make sure that the files you're showing it's going to learn from those files, right? So you probably don't want to be showing it files that are really, really old or out of date or interesting or wrong.
Okay.
So it's helpful to make sure that if the document should have expired and been removed from your system, that actually happened.
Okay.
So that's a good tip is to make sure you come into it with your data house in good order.
So if you were, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I want to expand just slightly on that permissions thing because it comes up a lot. The example I give, I mentioned that Copilot respects your Microsoft 365 permissions, and so the example I gave at where was it, Oklahoma, I said, if Alice has a document that she's created and put in her OneDrive, right, and Alice asks Copilot about that document, well, sure, Copilot will answer questions about that document. It's in Alice's OneDrive. But if Bob asks questions about that document and she hasn't shared that document with Bob's Copilot isn't going to know anything about it. It's not even going to acknowledge that it exists, right? Because Copilot, again, respects those permissions. So that's an important thing for people to understand is that it's not going to, Bob doesn't suddenly gain access to Alice's document if she hasn't shared it with him.
So that raises a question that several people ask, and I've thought too. How, if it does, will it interface with Teams? What if you've got a shared document, say in Teams? Can you plug that into Copilot or vice versa?
Yeah, if a document is shared with you in a Teams meeting, then sure, Copilot can see that because it's been shared with you. So yes, absolutely, your Copilot can see anything that was shared with you in Teams. Now, if it's a meeting you weren't invited to, then no. But if it's a meeting that you were in or invited to, then yes, because it was shared with you. So you do gain that access.
That was one of the, Teams in and of itself was you talk about storage and rights and security, and it stores stuff can store stuff all over the place. So that was a big question. So
Yeah, and
if you were advising someone, let's say a small firm,
yeah.
because that's who, like you, that's who I deal with a lot. Um, what are the top three things you think Copilot could do? If you were coming to me and I said,
Mhm.
"Hey Ben, should I buy this Copilot thing? I'm a small, we got 5 attorneys. We do everything under the sun. I do a will one day and a DUI the next day, and
Mhm.
advise a business incorporation. I'm in a small town in New Hampshire, and I do it all. What can Copilot do for me?
So there's a few areas where I think Copilot is pretty strong. The one that's kind of obvious to most people is create the create and edit scenario, right? So that's when you ask Copilot, hey, Copilot, draft a blog post on probate in the state of New Hampshire for an audience of seniors who aren't very sophisticated on the subject, right? And it'll do it. Now, the more data you give, the more details you can give it, the better it's going to be. I mean, you could just say draft a blog post on probate. Will Copilot do that? Yeah. Will it be good? Maybe. Um, but if you give it more detail, like who's the audience, what more specific topics do you want it to address, right? You'll get a better result usually. So it can do things like that. I've had people ask me, attorneys ask me at conferences, hey, could you have Copilot draft a memorandum about this? Can you have it draft a brief about that? I'm like, yeah, I could ask it to. Let's try it. And we've tried it. And generally speaking, when they've looked at it, the most common response I get is, that's a really good start. That's what I get, right? I don't get, that's brilliant, I'm filing that tomorrow. What I get is, okay, it did a 4-page brief on this topic or memo on this topic, and that's pretty good start. I could work with that. And so I think the create edit scenario is powerful. It helps you get off that blank page. One thing I say over and over and over again, especially in my conferences, is to treat Copilot kind of like a legal intern, right? Give it specific tasks, give it as much detail as possible about what you want, and then carefully review what it comes back to you with, right? Never, ever show the output of a generative AI to a client or the court without reviewing it first. Don't, because that's
Yeah,
just going to go badly. Right?
we've all seen those horror stories.
And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, and
Yeah.
where is it pulling from? Is it just working in your M365 environment, or is it pulling from a broader pool of data?
So it depends a little bit on your settings, but for the most part, it's pulling primarily from your Microsoft 365 data, and it's also supplemented usually with web content and its own its own LLM also, of course. So it's got its own LLM. It's got web for some live stuff. Now, the web depends a little bit on where you are in the product. Certain parts of Copilot don't use web, some do, and you can turn it on or off. There's a toggle. You'll
You
see in
can.
some of them. You've probably seen the toggle for use web content. And so you can turn it on or off if you don't want web, for example. And then it's pulling
And
from your own.
what about the LLM? Where is that coming from?
So that's produced, that model comes from us, and it gets updated with some regularity. I'd have to check. I think it's mostly based on GPT-4o right now, and then we add some of our own magic on top of that. But that's primarily what it is right now, I
Right.
think. It changes with some regularity. So
Sure.
Right. Okay.
When you're talking content creation, one of the things that I've found kind of as a wow thing to look at and show is the creation of PowerPoint decks and what have you. Because obviously you can just give it a simple statement and it can give you a deck with some graphics and cool stuff. How configurable is that? Like, for example, could you feed it like a slide template and things like that and really kind of go to town with that sort of stuff?
yeah, in fact, if you wanted to start, like, let's say your firm has a branded template for PowerPoint that it uses as the basis of everything. What you can do is open that template first, and then ask Copilot to create your deck, and it'll use that template as its base.
Nice.
The other thing it does that's a real crowd pleaser is, let's say you have a Word document already that's on this topic, or more than one Word document. You can say, create a presentation based on this Word document, and it will go through the document and use that as its primary source of information.
Nice.
In fact, I got asked, I don't get asked to do new presentations that often. Most people want me to redo a presentation they saw me do at some other conference. But I got asked to do a net new presentation 6 months or so ago for somebody. And so I thought, you know what, let's see what Copilot can do to help here. So when I start a new presentation, I usually start in OneNote, right? I create an outline, I do some research and pull that in, I make my notes, right? I've got a OneNote page that's kind of what I want to talk about. And so what I did for this one is I opened a new page in OneNote and I said to Copilot, create an outline for I don't even remember what the topic was now. Create an outline for a 1-hour presentation to a group of attorneys about this topic. Assume the audience is not very sophisticated about it yet, right? And it came back and it created me an outline for this presentation. Was the outline perfect? No. Was it good? Yeah. I had to add a couple things, change a couple things, delete a couple things, but for the most part, yeah, it was a pretty good outline. And so then once I had it the way I wanted it, I copied that outline. I went to Word. I opened Copilot in Word because of course, this conference, like all of them, they're going to want speaker materials, right? They want handouts. So I said, write a Word document, write an article, I think I said, based on this outline. And Copilot went through and it created a 7 or 8 page article based on that outline. Was it great? No. Was it good? Yeah. Again, it took me a little bit of, editing. I went through, I read it, I moved a couple things, deleted a couple things, added a couple things, but it was a really good start. Okay. Then I went to PowerPoint and I said, create a presentation based on this Word document. And it did it. And it made me a 30-slide deck, I think it was, based on that Word document it had created. The whole process, I mean, in the past, it might have taken me 2 or 3 days to create a new thing from scratch, right? With this one, I think it took me, I don't know, 3 hours, something like that, 4 hours.
Nice.
It was definitely nice. Yeah. What's that?
Yeah, so that's very nice. I mean, that's the type of thing that I've seen. Like, yeah, I've actually even started, like you said, with create an outline. In Word, create the outline. I don't use OneNote, but I created the outline in Word and then use that to create a slide deck in PowerPoint. So yeah, it's pretty slick. So what are some of the limitations? What are the things that Copilot isn't good at yet? And one of the things that I know that I'll mention is I did attend a Copilot session at EltaCon, and they had people from 3 different law firms. One of the things I know they mentioned was certain size of documents or in terms of like having trouble after a certain number of pages and so forth. So those are the types of things that I'm curious about that people should know about.
Yeah, so context window is the technical term for that. The amount of data that the AI can look at any given moment. That actually just changed for us for certain things. So like summarize, for example, the size of the context window quadrupled in Copilot. Yeah. So we're up to about 80,000 words now, I think, that it'll do.
Okay.
Which is a pretty sizable amount, but it's still not, massive. We're still aiming for more. But if you've got more than 80,000 words, then you need to break it up if you're going to use Copilot for that. What else does it not do that well? I mean, again, like any generative AI, you really need to review the output. I have found it to be a little bit hit or miss. So it did a really nice job creating that presentation for me. But I had another project where I asked it to ask me baseball trivia, and it did a pretty poor job, to be honest. So
what?
Yeah. So,
come on.
Yeah,
got to work on that baseball trivia.
I know. So it does things like that. One of the things we've seen in PowerPoint sometimes is, especially if the topic is a little bit ambiguous, in PowerPoint, it does try to add images, as you may have noticed. One of the really cool things in PowerPoint is it'll add speaker notes automatically for you too. But
nice.
The images, and we've been working hard on this, so it should be better now. But I know in the past, we've had a few issues where, especially if the topic was ambiguous, that the image might not align to what you expected. So for example, I have a test presentation that's about Hawaii, and I had it add a slide about Diamond Head, and it put in a picture of a diamond ring. It's like, okay, I see where it was going. It went with diamond instead of diamond head. I think we've made a lot of progress on making that better, but that's still something to just watch out for, is just make sure that the images, if it does images, are what you expected.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Those are a couple things.
You said it to me just a minute ago. I asked you about tips, and you said the first one was create. Any other?
Oh, yeah.
Or I said, help me. What's it going to do for me?
Yeah.
Anything else?
So create's a big one. Kind of an ancillary to that is edit. So a lot of times I'll be writing something, and you probably all had this experience, right? You're writing something and some part of it just isn't quite working for you, right? You're looking at it and you're like, that paragraph, I don't know, it just doesn't quite, it's not quite there. And so one of the things Copilot can do really nicely is you can go in, you can tell it, suggest ways I can rewrite this to make it clearer or more persuasive or more concise or more professional, or, pick your own adjective. But you can do that, and Copilot will come back and make some suggestions, and maybe you like them, maybe you don't, but it's usually pretty good, and at least gives you some thoughts that maybe hadn't occurred to you before. So when I ask it to do that, probably half the time I don't use what it comes back with, but the other half of the time I go, okay, you know what, that's pretty good. I think I want to use that, or I want to use a slight variation of that. Jared Spataro, one of our corporate vice presidents at one of the Copilot events, said, Copilot will often be right and occasionally will be usefully wrong. And I just love that framing, because it really brought into measure that, yes, it's often going to be correct, but sometimes it won't be. And sometimes when it's not right, it's still useful because it points you in a direction that makes you go, okay, that's not quite what I wanted, but I see where you're going with that, and let me just make some tweaks.
Sure.
So that edit capability is kind of nice. One of the other things I've recommended to attorneys sometimes is, let's say you're going to write something, you're writing a brief, you're writing a memo, you're writing a letter, whatever you're writing, you write it, okay? Ask Copilot to write the same thing and see what it comes up with, and see if it may be better than what you did. It may not be as good as what you did, or there might be that it's not as good as what you did, but you really like this third paragraph. Like, I really like the way it worded that, or I really like the way it organized this section. So there may be some things in there you can take from it, and it takes seconds to do it. So it can be a really handy sort of second opinion, right? So I like that create and edit.
Yeah.
Probably the second big area where it's helpful for attorneys is ask and summarize. It's really good at that. So somebody has sent you a long Word document, and you can ask questions about the Word document, right? You can say, what dates and deadlines are mentioned in this document, right? I mean, I could go searching through a 25-page document, but I could just ask it, tell me what dates and create a table of the dates and deadlines mentioned in this document. It'll do it, right? Summarize this document. It's the obvious one. It does that. That's nice. Compare two documents. You can have it compare two documents like a classic red line, except it's doing a generative thing where it's going to come out and sort of in a narrative tell you what the differences are between the two documents, or the differences that it sees between the two documents, which has another advantage because it doesn't get bogged down in sort of formatting minutia that you may or may not care about. Like some of the traditional redlining tools, you probably know, occasionally it would flag like, well, this paragraph was 12-point text before, and now it's 11-point text.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
You've
That's
got a dangling participle there.
Yeah. So I'm looking for wording changes. I'm looking for meaning changes. I'm looking for the dollar amount down here changed. Like, that's okay. That's what I care about, and that's the kind of thing that the AI is going to flag. So
now,
that
same limits, size limits on summarization.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. For right now, it's roughly 80,000 characters. Yeah. And all LLMs.
Sorry. Well, I was just going to say, so if you exceed that limit, is it telling you it can't do a file that large, or how's it handling?
Well, I haven't tested it, so I can't say for sure. My guess is it probably wouldn't say anything. It would probably just do the best it could within the limits it had. But I haven't tested that, so I could be wrong. But
okay.
But that's my guess, is that it would probably wouldn't say anything. And I was going to say a problem that a lot of LLMs have, and we're working to improve it, but ours has it to some extent, is that LLMs tend to prioritize, in a very large document, tend to prioritize what's at the beginning and what's at the end, and the stuff in the middle can get a little bit less priority. Yeah. It's called the lost in the middle effect. Our LLM has that too a little bit. It's depending on the length of the document, it's very case by case, but it's just something to be aware of. If you get a result that you didn't expect, it may be that the text in the middle was not as important or viewed as important.
So this may be a bit of a curveball, Ben, because I just thought about it. You're talking about LLMs, but I've seen some articles recently about Microsoft and a small language model. Do you know anything about that?
I don't. I'm aware that we're doing a lot of small language model work. I don't have a lot of personal experience with it yet, so I don't. You think?
I mean, is it literally an alternative to an LLM? Are they just trying to scale that down? Or and again, I don't mean to put you on the spot. If you don't know, that's great.
Okay. My understanding, and I could be mistaken, but my understanding is it's sort of the collection of experts concept, where instead of having the one model that's going to do everything, you might have multiple small models. One model specializes in image generation, one model specializes in summarization, one model specializes in creating edit. So that's my understanding, is it's smaller, more specialized models that are ideally more compute and energy efficient, possibly faster, probably faster, and possibly also, since it's tuned for that specific use, probably a little more accurate. Not my area of expertise, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, but we're still preliminary on that. I mean, this is,
Yeah, I think so.
but I was intrigued by it because
Mhm.
now that you even explain it that way, if it was specialized for certain functionality, that would
Mhm.
be really interesting. Yeah.
My
Okay.
guess, and it's just a guess, this is Ben Schorr's opinion, is that that's probably where things will go eventually, will be more a set of, some number of expert small language models, as opposed to trying to have the one language model that does everything.
Does everything. Yeah.
Sure.
I think that's
That makes sense.
probably where it'll go. And then just
Okay.
depending on what task you ask Copilot to do, it'll invoke however many small models are necessary to do the task.
Okay.
That would be
Makes
my guess.
sense. Sure. So you've talked about several of the things that Copilot can do.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's within Microsoft's realm. A lot of people, like for example, I have both the GPT plus account, and I have the
too.
Copilot account, and some of the things you can do in both. So how would you consider? What would you consider to be different between the two? Why would, other than the fact that you're doing it within the Microsoft products, what would be unique about Copilot versus ChatGPT?
Yeah, I think for me, the big one is it would depend on what your tasks are. So if I'm working with client data, I'm going to stay in Copilot. And I'm going to stay in the paid version of Copilot, which is inside the Microsoft 365 tenant, because then you've got enterprise data protection. Your data is confidential. We do not train the LLM on customer data, so there's nothing happening there. We don't train it on your prompts and your responses. So all of that stays within your Microsoft 365 tenant, subject to all the same privacy guidelines that you find in Microsoft 365. So if you're doing anything confidential or client sensitive, I would do all that in the Microsoft 365 version in Copilot. If you're doing sort of general web things, like you want it to write a public blog post, you could do that, and you want more of the web grounding, you could do that certainly in ChatGPT or in the Bing Copilot, the free Copilot, which is a little bit more web centric. If you want to know what the weather is going to be like in London next week, that's certainly something I would do in the Bing Copilot or in ChatGPT rather than in the proprietary Microsoft 365 one, in the Copilot one. So that's kind of the way I think about it. Is it depends a little bit on the kind of stuff I'm working on and whether it's sensitive. And also, of course, neither ChatGPT nor the Bing Copilot are grounded in your Microsoft 365 data. So if what you're doing needs to be able to refer to your calendar, needs to be able to refer to your email, your Teams chats, your documents, like that all has to happen in Copilot, in Microsoft 365 Copilot, because otherwise none of those other things can see all that stuff.
Do you have to tell it to look at each of those, Ben, or will it just do that?
It will try to just do that. You will get better results if you point it, like, for example, if you want to get questions answered from a specific document, for example, in Copilot, if you type a front slash, it'll pop up a little picker that lets you specify the document. You could also paste in the URL of it, but that's a small pain in the where. So it's a little handier to just hit the front slash and pick it off a picker. And so if you point it at the specific document you're interested in, you'll get better results, because you've pointed it right at that document. Now, if you don't do that, it'll do its best to figure out what document is the best one to refer to.
Right.
You may get it wrong sometimes, especially if you have a lot of documents that are similar. This kind of goes back to my thing earlier about if you've got 25-year-old documents in your system that aren't very good examples anymore, you may not want Copilot referring to those when it creates new documents. So it might be good to, if they should have expired and been archived, then you probably should do that.
Right.
So that's kind of the same thing. So
right.
Sure.
And same thing with people. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you can point it to. You can also ask it for with the front slash. You can ask it for files, people, emails, meetings.
That was my next question.
Yeah, there's something else too. I'm forgetting right now. We're always evolving that and adding more capabilities. Right. Yeah, the more specific you can be, the better. And
but it will do combos of those. I can say
look
could say look in email and calendar. Or email and documents.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can combine. Cool. You can say based on my email and this document, for example.
Right.
Definitely. You can do that. And you can do multiple documents usually. So depending on what task you're doing, but you could say summarize these 3 documents and you could hit front slash type. Select one document, slash select the second document, Yeah,
Gotcha.
you can have it point at multiple documents, which is really handy. The other thing it can do, which I think is pretty useful, and I do it sometimes with specific documents, is brainstorming. So for example, I had written an article for our site, and I wasn't really feeling it for the title. Right? I'm trying to think of what the heck should I title this article. And so I had drafted the article in Word. And so I told Copilot, suggest 10 possible titles for this article. And then I pointed it at that Word document. And it came back with 10 titles, and 7 or 8 of them weren't very good, but 1 or 2 of them were actually pretty good. And so I think I ended up using a variation of one of the ones that Copilot suggested.
Nice.
But yeah, so brainstorming like that's really handy. That's one of the nice things with Copilot is, it's an AI. It's not judging you. It doesn't sleep, right? It's not tired, right? It doesn't get impatient with you. It's not going to go, that's the stupidest idea I ever heard, right? And so it can be super handy, if you get some idea about whatever, to just go to Copilot and say, evaluate the pros and cons of, and tell it the idea in as much detail as possible, and it'll give you a response.
Sure.
It's a thinking buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to put my e-discoverer hat on here for a moment. One of the things that I've been kind of starting to kind of push is the idea of generative AI is generating content, potential evidence eventually. And obviously with Copilot, you're generating, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Office type files that you've done historically manually. Now you're using AI aiding to do so. One of the things I could certainly see is, you're generating more content, more drafts, more things like that might be out there. And then another thing is potentially the work product associated with generating those things. So one of the things I'm interested in is, what is Microsoft tracking from a standpoint of the Copilot generation process? Because I could certainly see that potentially being discoverable in some form at some point in a case. And and to me, I'm wondering what you all are doing in that, and what people could pull if they had to from an evidentiary standpoint.
I see. Okay. So I'm a little out of my depth here, I will admit. With enterprise data protection, I believe I saw that e-discovery is able to capture prompts and responses. And by e-discovery, I mean our e-discovery tool that's in Microsoft.
Right. I figured. Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly it would be able to capture just like any Word document. Any Word documents that the AI created, or PowerPoints that are saved in OneDrive or SharePoint. It's no different than a Word document somebody created by hand. So those would certainly be available.
I'm sorry to interrupt your train of thought, but are they being saved as something different? Are they not a .doc?
No, they still are. DOCX.
DOCX, yeah.
Yeah. But
yeah, no, they're the same.
There's no special category. It's yeah. Okay. Or if it was a spreadsheet, it's being saved in the format that you're working in. Okay. Yeah.
Is there something to indicate with that? Is there something somewhere to indicate that the content was AI generated versus human generated?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Cool.
Very interesting. Yeah, because to me, I think, of course, I could see that coming up at some point. Is right. So
sure.
Weren't there? I think there were a couple of federal courts that require you to file an affidavit stating either affirmatively you did use AI, or I did not use AI in the creation of this content. So
yeah. And that's kind of where I was going too, is it's, we're getting to the point where people are having to have that conversation of how much do we disclose, right? Obviously the courts are going to impose their rules. Even with a blog post, is it necessary, if you wrote a blog post and Copilot helped you write that blog post, is it necessary to disclose that? Necessary might be a strong word, but it might be a good idea to mention, this post was written with the help of an AI.
I don't know, are you required to reveal that you've used a ghostwriter to write an article? People do it all the time. Ari Kaplan lists as one of his skill sets on his website, ghostwriter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a ghostwriter. That's absolutely. So
I ghost wrote a couple of chapters of a technical book a few years ago, and got together in some chats with other friends who were in my field. We discovered that each of us had ghost written a couple of chapters of that book. And we
I'm
thought,
feeling
well,
left out here. Nobody's ever asked me to ghostwrite anything. Holy
and then
cow.
we were like, hey, did Paul write any of this book? Like, seems like we wrote all these chapters.
Yes, 6 different guys to each write a chapter, right?
That's kind of how it went. Yeah, he actually did write quite a bit of it,
That's funny.
yeah. So that's a fair point. Is it necessary to disclose that you used a ghostwriter? I guess not. And so maybe it's not necessary to disclose that you used an AI, which is effectively just a technological ghostwriter.
So my last question, Ben, is something I raised at the outset. Resources. Where do people go to learn about this?
Sure.
We
have a ton of material on our site now.
You do?
I would encourage, anybody who hasn't been there, I would encourage, go check out Copilot Lab, which you can find in Google or Bing pretty readily. And there's a lot of articles there. We've got videos, we've got, and we're adding more to it almost every day, really. New articles, videos, training materials.
Well, good.
That's all available there. Also, for more of the administrative stuff, for more of the e-discovery questions, things like that. Learn.microsoft.com has a whole, I don't know the URL of it learn.microsoft.com, but I don't know the subdomain yet offhand. But if you go there, you'll find that we have a big Copilot section there. It has a bunch of administrator materials that gives you a lot more technical detail about how things are working under the hood. Doug's nodding. I guess he's already seen learn.microsoft.com.
Actually, that was one of the things the Copilot panel last week talked about, was that, and they also talked about the link to the Copilot roadmap, because there's a place for that as well, and what have you. So
right. We have a public roadmap that shows things we're working on. Yeah, that's right. And so Copilot Lab and learn.microsoft.com are two of the best ones. The other one, if you're thinking about rolling out Microsoft Copilot, is adoption.microsoft.com. Has a lot of resources for how to deploy Copilot in your firm. If you're a small firm, it may be overkill for what you're doing, maybe not. If you're a medium-sized firm or a larger firm, then there's probably a lot of really useful stuff in there for you. And one of the things that's in there that's kind of interesting is we've got some scenarios content in there, including there are some legal specific scenarios in terms of how you can use Copilot in a law firm for things like contract review or things like that.
Oh, that's good. That would be helpful.
So I think it's worth browsing through. You might see some useful stuff there.
All right. And how about you? Are you speaking anywhere in the next 12 months? I mean, you still speak at the ABA Tech Show?
I do, and I did this spring. I think I'll be back next spring, assuming they've invited me. I'll be at McCormick Center, and I'll be. So my next one, I think I'm speaking at the Washington State Bar Association next month.
Oh,
so
nice.
I'm up here in Seattle already, so it's a short trip.
Yeah.
And then I think I have something on the books for Omaha, Nebraska in October, maybe. Yeah.
Okay.
So definitely still speaking at conferences.
Good. And
do you know Dennis Garcia from Microsoft?
Sure.
Yeah, Dennis is doing a lot of webinars these days with bar associations.
Okay.
And so you may see him doing a lot of the online stuff. I tend to do more of the in-person stuff, and Dennis does more of the webinar stuff.
Right. That's good to include in this discussion, and to let people know there's a webinar resource for them, because a lot of people still really like that. I'm with you. I'm old school. I still love the face-to-face and pressing the flesh, but
I find when I just do webinars, it ends up being me talking to my webcam for an hour, and that's, there's no feedback from the audience. You don't get the back and forth like we're having here. It's just not that interesting to me. And so I tend not to do them very often. Dennis is terrific at them, and so I'm more than happy to let him.
Yeah, I've been on a panel with Dennis before. He's great. Yeah.
No, I agree. Okay, good. Any last words, Ben? Anything you'd like to sum up about Copilot?
My advice is give it a try, see what it'll do for you. It's it's not a big red button, but most of the people I talk to, most of the customers I talk to who are using it say it saves them 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes a day. Some tasks it does a really good job on, some tasks not as much.
I love the slideshow, the slide deck feature. To me, that's
slide deck's
great. I do a lot of speaking and do a lot of slideshows, and
Copilot in Teams is great. Being able to ask it to recap this meeting, being able to ask it questions about a meeting. I was in a meeting the other day, and one of the engineers said something, and I wasn't completely clear on what he said. And I said to Copilot, "What did Dennis just say about whatever he was asking about?" and it sort of restated what he said and sort of explained
Oh,
it,
nice.
which was kind of
Nice.
handy. It was nice to get that explanation, on the side, and so having Copilot do stuff like that is really great. So Teams is a really powerful use for Copilot too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Teams is especially at the corporate level. In the sessions I went to with any corporate representation, they're all over it, and big firms, of course, but businesses for sure. Well, Ben, Doug, any last questions? Anything?
Nope, I think we've covered a pretty good amount of ground here,
Yeah,
Ben.
this has
Thank
been
you so
great.
much for all the information
Yeah,
on Copilot, the things you can do, some of the things to watch out for. Definitely was very enlightening.
Yeah, my
yeah.
pleasure.
I appreciate your taking the time. How's the weather in Seattle?
Yeah,
That's
it's
my.
not too bad. It's a little overcast today, but it's in the high 70s. And
No, Doug and
yeah.
I don't want to talk to you.
Why? How's it where you are?
Oh well, we're both down on the Gulf Coast. I'm in New
Yeah,
Orleans, and Doug's in Houston. We're
98
90.
degrees, 98, 99,
Ooh.
feels like 110, stuff like that.
Yeah,
I did Ironman Texas in Houston a bunch of years ago, and it was
really.
96 degrees and 90% humidity or
Yeah,
something like
yep.
that. It was like,
That's our
oh,
summer.
Yep, that's
You
that's
just
it.
you just summarized our summer in one sentence there. 90, baby. So
yeah.
I miss the sun. Gail was from Seattle or grew up in Seattle, and still have a lot of family up there. Um, the summers there are just glorious, just absolutely glorious. You, you get to see the mountain every day when you drive. You could drive to work. You go to
I
campus.
do. I do. I drive in every day. I got an electric car that I like. It's fun to drive. So
Yeah,
um, I used to take the corporate shuttle bus to work, but now I drive in because I like the car too
yeah.
much. I told my
So
wife
Gail
I'm going to
grew
start driving to work by way of Portland just because I like driving the car so much.
right. So Gail grew up in Redmond,
Yeah,
um, in the condo that her mom owned. All the kids grew up in, um, and when Redmond was just a dinky little town, and the site of the Microsoft campus now, it was a place where all the kids, when they were her peers, when they were in high school, used to go to pick magic mushrooms. There were mushrooms growing all over the fields back there. And that's where
sure.
they used to go to get them. And your mom went, "Oh, where are you guys going today?" "Oh, we're just going to go have a picnic down in the meadow."
Nice.
So it's
Sure has
kind
changed a lot since then.
of a nice analogy, it was mushrooms back in the day, and now it's still growing.
Yeah.
All sorts of wild and crazy stuff. So
Have you
it's
been up to Microsoft campus lately?
I have not. Last time I was in the area was uh, uh, about 6 months after Gail died. We were able to
Mm,
do a family service at the cemetery, um,
okay.
and didn't make it over. No, pretty much stuck in downtown Bellevue. Saw some friends, hung out with
Sure.
people there. Yeah,
We've just
that
we've just built.
Master is it Monster now?
We're still finishing this new. They knocked down a bunch of our original buildings, 8 or 10 of them, and built this new campus. I'm in one of the brand new buildings right now, in fact,
Interesting.
and they're very fancy.
When I was first living there, and when I first met Gail, they were just starting um, with some pop-ups down um, right on the Bell Red line down by the lake by the Burger. I don't know if the Burgermaster
It
is
is.
still there.
It
Across
is.
the street on that hill, there
Yeah.
were a series of pop-up office buildings, and they were originally Microsoft buildings, and
Okay.
all the Microsoft guys hung out at the Burgermaster, and the
Mhm.
Seahawks used to have a practice facility just up the on the lake there where that nice hotel is now. I forget what it's called, but and a couple of the e-discovery companies started there. EED was in an office building right there. It was that little intersection was a kind of a hotbed of activity. But Microsoft, I still remember when it was, what's this new upstart company? They built a building and now they're building another one. Now they're up to 5. Well, what do these guys do?
Now we have the biggest corporate campus in the world.
Is it
Yep.
really?
There are manufacturing campuses that are bigger, and there are university campuses that are bigger, but apparently
Sure.
there are. So I'm told there are no corporate campuses bigger than ours. We're
Wow.
170 acres or something like that, and
Yeah.
121 buildings, or
And
I forget how many buildings we
again,
have now, but a lot.
as I recall, there were also a lot of satellite space, right? In office space in Bellevue. Is that
There
still going on
there
until you
was,
built the new
yeah.
building?
Well, with COVID, a lot of people
Ah,
moved to a hybrid work model, and so
yeah,
when I first joined, there were 42 to 45,000 people that worked on this campus every day. But now, because a lot of people are working from home at least 2 or 3 or 4 days a week, sometimes some of them working from home all the time, our actual number of people on campus shrunk way down, and we didn't need to have all those satellites because now we have a lot more available space on campus. A lot of buildings kind of emptied out, so
there you go.
so they closed.
Seamus went to Bellevue High School,
Yeah.
and he's an avid, still is an avid skateboarder. But Microsoft was the prime tenant in a couple of buildings down by the Bellevue Athletic Club, and the
Mhm.
skateboarders used to go into those buildings at night because most of the people went home. They skated in the parking garages,
Right.
and the Bellevue police didn't bother them in there, um, and the security guys were pretty good about it. They didn't view
That's
them
good to hear.
as total ruffians at least, and so he always used to talk about, yeah, Microsoft was really nice to skateboarders. I always remember that about growing up in Bellevue. Microsoft treated us okay.
That's good to hear. Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't have that Bellevue space anymore. We gave up Bellevue. We gave up, I would say, probably 90% of our off-campus, the leased space we had in various areas around this,
right. Interesting.
Western Oregon or Western Washington. Pretty much all of it, we gave it up.
Right. Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
we
thanks again, Ben. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thanks,
Hopefully
Ben.
I'll make it to ABA Tech Show next year, and
yeah,
if so, I'll be sure to look you up and say hi.
yeah, I hope so.
All right. Thanks a lot, folks, and we'll see you next time on the eDiscover channel.